This story is titled, I Helped Raise My Wife's Son from Her Previous Marriage. At 16, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're just the guy who pays for stuff." I just nodded. 2 years later, he called me from jail, and I let it ring. I guess you could say it started with a birthday card. Not the kind that sings a jingle or comes stuffed with cash. Just a plain, store-bought card. Blue cover. Gold lettering. Inside, scribbled in Sharpie like an afterthought. "Thanks for everything, C." No dad. Not even my name. Just an initial. Like I was some corporate sponsor funding his teenage angst. I read that card on my 45th birthday, sitting at our dining table alone, while my wife and her son, our son, as she used to insist, were God knows where, probably celebrating without me again. I used to think love was about effort. Show up. Provide. Listen. Be patient. Especially with a kid who wasn't biologically yours. Especially when his real dad dipped the moment diapers came into play and never looked back. So yeah, I did the damn work. I taught him how to ride a bike. I stayed up with him through stomach bugs and algebra meltdowns. Sat in the front row at every school play, every JV game, every sad little cello concert where he played all the wrong notes, but still looked proud as hell. I was there. Until suddenly, I wasn't enough. It started small, always does. A forgotten thanks, an eye roll when I'd remind him to take the trash out. Then came the slammed doors, the phone calls he'd taken whispers, the "you're not my dad" heat that simmered behind every conversation. I told myself it was just hormones. That awful teenage cocktail of rage and insecurity. I tried to let it roll off. But then came that moment. He was 16. We'd just gotten into another argument over his grades, his attitude, something. Hell, it could have been me breathing wrong. And in the middle of it, he stood there, arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes boring into me like I was something he scraped off his sneaker. "You're just the guy who pays for stuff," he said. Cold, like he'd been saving it. And I swear to God, something inside me went quiet. Not hurt, not angry, just still, like a switch flipped. I didn't yell, didn't storm off. I just nodded, turned around, and left the room. I wish I could say that was the worst part. But it wasn't. The worst part was what came after. The way my wife looked at me when I told her what he said. She didn't even look surprised. She just sighed, rubbed her temples, and muttered, "He didn't mean it. Didn't mean it." Like those words hadn't carved out something permanent in my chest. I stopped trying after that. I still paid the bills, made dinner, helped fix the leaky faucet when no one else would. But emotionally, I checked out, kept the peace, became exactly what he said I was. The guy who pays for stuff. Then 2 years later, the phone rang. Unknown number. Jailhouse prefix. His voice on the voicemail. That day, I looked at my phone. Just looked. And I let it ring. I didn't answer the call when it came in. Not the first time, not the second, not the third. And even though I could feel something heavy pressing against my chest every time I saw that number flash across the screen, I let it go to voicemail like it was just another scam call or some long-lost relative trying to sell me essential oils or family guilt. Because ignoring it was easier than opening a door I'd already closed and bolted shut. The first message started out like a confession and ended like a plea, his voice low and uncertain. The way someone sounds when they're not just lost but genuinely afraid. Like a kid in the dark who doesn't want to admit they need a nightlight. "Hey, it's me," he said, as if I wouldn't recognize his voice after nearly 2 decades of late-night fevers and scraped knees and silent car rides from school when he was too angry to speak and I was too tired to keep pulling words out of the air just to fill the silence. "You probably don't want to hear from me," he continued, and for once he was right, or at least partly right. I didn't want to hear from this version of him. Not the one who suddenly needed something now that life had clawed its way back at him. "I didn't know who else to call," he said. And that's when the irony landed like a sucker punch. Because after all the times I'd been dismissed as irrelevant, the emotional wallpaper of the household, the ATM with a driver's license, now, I was apparently the only number left in his contacts that might still pick up. I didn't. The second message came 12 hours later, and this time there was no posturing in his voice, no false bravado. Just this hollow, scratchy panic leaking out between words, like he hadn't slept and maybe hadn't eaten either. "Okay," he said, and paused like he was bracing for impact. "I guess you're not going to answer. Makes sense. I wouldn't either." Then a breath, shaky and sharp. "But I didn't do what they're saying I did. I swear, I didn't. It's Mom." Just 2 words. It's Mom. But they carried so much weight that for a second, I had to sit down. Because I knew that tone. I knew the way she could turn a conversation into a courtroom and guilt into gospel, and I knew, without needing details, that whatever this was, it probably wasn't as simple as possession charges or bad choices. She told them the pills weren't hers, he said. She said they were mine. And I could picture it. So clearly. Her tight smile, the way she'd talk around things while never quite lying, just nudging the truth into whatever shape she needed. She doesn't answer my calls now either, he added, and the bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, not the kind of bitterness you get from being abandoned once, but the kind that festers when you realize the one person you always thought would back you up is the one who sold you out. The third voicemail came the next morning. No anger, no pretense, just this quiet, defeated sort of sorrow that sounded too old for someone only 18. I just want to talk, he said. I know I don't deserve it, and I know I messed everything up, and I know I said some horrible things to you. There was a pause there, and I could hear the way he swallowed like he didn't want to keep going but had to, because maybe this was the only shot he had left. I thought I was being smart, pushing you away, making you feel like nothing, because I didn't understand what you were doing, or maybe I did, and it scared the hell out of me. You were just always there, no matter what. Even when I didn't want you to be. Even when I pretended you weren't. And I kept testing you, over and over again, waiting for you to fail, and you never did. You just kept showing up. And then he said it quietly, like he was afraid the word itself might betray him. I'm sorry, Dad. That word sat there like a landmine in the middle of my living room, and I think that's the moment something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but in that awful quiet way grief creeps in through the back door, sits down, and makes itself comfortable before you even realize what's happening. I thought about all the years I spent being the stand-in, the second choice, the one who showed up when his real dad didn't, who taught him how to tie his shoes, who sat in the ER waiting room when he broke his wrist, who stayed up checking the GPS app when he missed curfew, not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted to believe someone should still care that he made it home safe. And all those times I sat there at school functions while the other parents congratulated themselves for showing up, while I just silently hoped that maybe, just once, he'd look over and smile and call me Dad, without it feeling like an insult or a mistake. But now here he was, saying it for the first time without bitterness, without resentment, just regret. And I couldn't help but think how cruel it is that sometimes people only figure out what you meant to them after everything's already burned down. I didn't call him back. Not yet. But I didn't delete the voicemails either. I played them again later that night. All three. In the dark. Phone to my ear like it was some relic from a past life I hadn't fully buried. And when I heard him say Dad, again, I closed my eyes and thought, so now I'm Dad. Now that it's quiet. Now that there's no one else left. Funny how that works. I don't know exactly when I made the decision to go, whether it happened in the second replay of the voicemail or the fifth, or if it was somewhere in between the sound of his voice cracking and the word Dad slipping out like it had been waiting years to be said properly. But by morning I was already dressed, already halfway down the stairs, coffee untouched on the counter. Heart pounding with that nauseating mix of adrenaline and dread that only seems to show up when you're about to do something you know might destroy you, but you're too far in to stop now. The drive to the station was quiet. Unusually so, the kind of silence that hums in your ears like it's trying to make room for the thoughts you're not ready to have. And I remember gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary, not because I was angry, though God knows that was buried under the surface, but because if I didn't hold on to something, I might start shaking and never stop. I kept telling myself this is what fathers do. This is what real fathers do. The ones who stick around even after the thank yous disappear and the respect evaporates and the kid they raised turns into a stranger with your name still etched onto the emergency contact form. I didn't cry when I saw him, not because I wasn't overwhelmed, but because he looked worse than I had prepared myself for, hollow-eyed, skinnier, that half-grown facial hair of boys pretending to be men. And something about seeing him in that holding cell with those ridiculous plastic sandals and a paper cup of water in his hand made the pain feel smaller than the pity. Like the universe had kicked him too many times and finally, he understood what it was like to fall and have nobody catch you. And when they released him into my custody, after I posted the bail with a card I hadn't used since the last family vacation that I also mostly paid for, he didn't say much, didn't hug me, didn't even look me in the eye for the first 10 minutes of the drive home. But he didn't pull away either. And when we passed the intersection by the old pizza place, the one he used to beg to stop in after soccer games he barely played in, he said, "Thanks." And I nodded, not because it was enough, but because I needed that moment to mean something, anything, even if it was just a breadcrumb on the long road back. We didn't talk about her, not right away, because the wound was still too fresh, too raw. Like a scab, he kept picking it just to remind himself that betrayal doesn't always come with fangs or fists. Sometimes it wears a familiar perfume and calls itself Mom. And while he sat curled on my couch with the same blanket he used to insist was for babies, I made spaghetti the way he used to like it, plain, no sauce, just butter and salt, and pretended not to notice when he ate the entire bowl without once checking his phone. But once he was asleep, passed out with that same open-mouthed snore he used to deny he had, I opened my laptop, and that's when the part of me I thought had died woke up with a vengeance. The version of me that used to move mountains for a boy who never noticed. The version of me who once fought insurance companies and school boards and angry coaches just to give him a shot at being more than a statistic. And now here I was again, rolling up my sleeves for a new kind of battle, not with the system this time, but with her. Because now I knew. I knew about the pills and the statement and the lawyer she sent who didn't even pretend to be unbiased. I knew about the signed affidavit where she claimed he must have been holding them for someone, and how quickly she vanished once the heat got real. How she skipped out on bail hearings and changed her number and apparently told mutual friends that he needs tough love, which is rich coming from the woman who once cried because her favorite wine was out of stock at Whole Foods. So yes, I started documenting. I pulled every shared bank statement, every text she'd ever sent me where she admitted to things she now conveniently doesn't remember, every photo where she looked just a little too happy while her son sat in the background, out of focus, forgotten. And I started building something, not just a legal case, though that was part of it, but a kind of emotional scaffolding I could stand on, the delusional belief that if I could just fix this, just clean up this mess like I had so many others, then maybe I could undo the years of resentment and disconnection. Maybe I could rewrite the story from here on out. Maybe he'd call me dad again, and this time mean it not because he had to, but because he wanted to. I know it's naive. I know I'm too old to believe in redemption arcs that neatly wrap themselves up in 3 acts. And I know that the damage she caused, hell, the damage we caused, won't vanish just because I finally feel needed again, but for the first time in a long time. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a stranger. I saw a father. Flawed, yes. Tired, always. But standing. And somewhere in that mess of hope and anger and misplaced faith, I whispered a promise to myself, and maybe to him too, even if he couldn't hear it. We're going to fix this. I don't care what it takes. I think there's a moment, maybe just one, in every parent's life where they make a decision so blindly, so desperately rooted in love, that it bypasses logic entirely and drives straight through the part of the brain labeled "do not proceed," cliff ahead. And even as the car is midair, even as the consequences start to make themselves known in the rearview mirror, they still believe, somehow, someway, it'll all work out, because love fixes things, right? That's the lie I told myself the morning I decided to drive to her house. He didn't want to come, said he was tired, said his head hurt, said maybe we should just let it go, but there was something in his voice, a little too quiet, a little too steady, like he was rehearsing a line he'd said before, and I should have noticed it then. I should have recognized it for what it was, guilt, not the loud, confess everything kind, but the kind that slithers behind words and hides behind lowered eyes and fake exhaustion. But I wasn't listening, not really, because I was too full of righteous anger, too sure of the narrative I'd built like a scaffold around my pride, the one where she was the villain and I was the father rising from the ashes, finally getting his chance to defend his son, and maybe, just maybe, redeem himself for all the years he'd spent standing in the background like a coat rack with a bank account. So we went. The house hadn't changed, same beige stucco, same dying potted plants on the porch she always said were just between blooms, same wind chimes that played that stupid tinkly version of Edelweiss every time the breeze picked up, but something in the air felt tighter. Like the whole place was holding its breath. And then she opened the door. She wasn't expecting us. That much was clear. The shock on her face wasn't theatrical, it was bone deep. The kind of surprise that knocks the breath from your lungs before the panic catches up, and for a moment, just a brief flicker. I thought maybe she'd throw her arms around him. Maybe she'd cry and say it was all a mistake, say she'd been wrong, say anything that resembled regret. But she didn't. She stared at him like he was a moldy towel she found under the sink. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice tight, clipped, brittle. "You're a disgrace to this family. You were supposed to stay put. Do your time. Think about what you did." I opened my mouth, but the words came out jagged. "What he did? You set him up. Don't you dare turn this on him." She laughed, sharp and ugly. "Is that what he told you? That I framed him? Jesus, you're still that stupid." I blinked. "He used you," she said, arms crossed now, confidence returning like she'd just realized how far ahead she actually was in the game. "You're just the same sorry fool you've always been. He made up a story, fed you some crocodile tears, and you fell for it like always." I turned to look at him, and that's when it hit me, that look, the one I'd ignored in the car, the way he wasn't meeting my eyes, the way his shoulders folded inward not in pain but in preparation, like he was bracing for something he knew was coming. And suddenly, every voicemail, every thank you, every mumbled apology echoed differently in my head. It wasn't just guilt I'd seen in him. It was calculation. And still, he said nothing. Didn't deny it. Didn't confess either. Just stared at the porch step like it might open up and swallow him whole if he waited long enough. That's when I felt it. The betrayal, the weight of it. Not loud like a scream, but quiet like a hand closing around your throat. Slow and steady until you realize you haven't taken a full breath in minutes, and I backed away without thinking. Like I could actually retreat from what I already knew was true. I looked at him one last time and managed to say it, though it came out more like a question than anything else. You lied. He didn't respond, not with words, anyway, but his eyes finally met mine, and there was nothing in them but shame, and maybe a flicker of something like regret, though I couldn't tell if it was for what he'd done or just for getting caught. And that's when I broke. Not in the dramatic way, not fists pounding or voices raised or sobs echoing across a front lawn, but in the quiet collapse of someone who realizes, for the second time in 2 weeks, that the people he loves most have no problem using him like a stepping stone and calling it love. I turned, walked back to the car, hands trembling just enough to make the keys rattle when I tried to unlock the door, and when I sat behind the wheel, I didn't start the engine. I just stared through the windshield, not seeing anything, really. Just thinking about how stupid I'd been, how willingly stupid, how desperate I must have been to feel needed that I handed myself over like a spare battery, fully charged and ready to power whatever broken story someone else needed to run a little longer. He got into the passenger seat quietly. Didn't speak. Didn't apologize. I didn't look at him. I just started the engine and drove. And somewhere between her house and mine, the final piece clicked into place, not with rage this time, not even disappointment, just the slow, dull ache of understanding something far too late to stop it. People don't change. Not really. And the ones who do, they usually don't come back. I didn't say anything as I started the car, didn't even look at him as he closed the door, didn't try to explain or comfort or give one of those hollow half-lies parents tell their kids to make things seem okay when they're anything but. Because there was nothing left in me to soften the blow, nothing left to cushion the truth, and I wasn't going to sugarcoat this one, not after what I'd just seen, not after what she just confirmed with that smug little laugh and those cutting words and the silence he didn't even try to deny. I just drove. Hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked on the road, mind unraveling faster than I could gather the pieces, because somewhere in the twisted math of it all, I convinced myself that love equaled redemption, that second chances meant something, that a good man could still fix things with enough faith and money and pain tolerance. But all I'd really done was serve myself up on a silver platter to be picked clean again, 2 years older, a little more tired, and still stupid enough to think people change when all they really do is get better at hiding their true nature. It wasn't until he glanced at the GPS and realized where we were going that he spoke. No, Dad, come on, don't do this. His voice cracked, desperate now, all pretense gone, and still I didn't answer. He leaned closer, panic blooming like sweat. Please, don't take me back there. I swear I'll make it right. I messed up, okay? I panicked, but I need time, just time. Still nothing from me. And then he saw it, really saw it. The prison signs, the exit we took just 2 nights ago when I bailed him out and told myself we were starting fresh, the one where I thought I was saving my son, not being baited like some sad aging fool still chasing the idea of fatherhood like it was a race he hadn't already lost. He slammed his hand against the window. Dad, please. I didn't mean to lie. I didn't think you'd help me if I told the truth. And that, finally, broke the dam. I screamed, not words at first, just noise, animal and guttural and feral, the kind of sound you make when the soul starts to splinter from the weight of everything you've carried alone for too damn long. Then came the words, hot and venomous and sharp like shattered glass in my throat. You think I'm AF ******* ing joke, don't you? You think I'm just the guy who's too pathetic to say no, too desperate to feel useful that he'll keep falling for the same trick over and over again. You think I don't see you? I do. I see you now. I see everything. He was crying, begging, voice trembling so hard I could barely understand him. You said you believed in me. I believed in who you could have been, I shot back, spitting the words like poison. Not this. Not someone who looks their father in the eye and lies just to escape the consequences of their own stupidity. Not someone who uses the word, Dad, like it's just a key to unlock a cell. He tried to open the door, actually reached for the handle, probably thinking if he could throw himself out onto the shoulder and run, I'd slam the brakes and change my mind like the good old pushover he'd always counted on. But the child lock was on. Of course it was. Even now, I'd instinctively protected him from himself. And somehow, that made me even angrier. I parked in front of the facility in silence. The guard at the desk didn't ask questions, just raised an eyebrow as I handed over the paperwork, eyes flicking from me to my son, who was now pale and shaking and quiet, like the panic had calcified into something colder. "I'm returning him," I said, my voice flat, hollow, unfamiliar even to me. "There was a mistake. He doesn't belong with me." The intake process was fast. Too fast. His hand brushed mine one last time before they led him away, a final pathetic attempt to make contact, like he suddenly understood what he'd broken and how badly, and for one stupid second I almost flinched, almost reached back, almost said wait. But I didn't. I walked out before they could close the door. I sat in the car for a long time after that. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. And then, I cried. Not the way I had in the past, quietly, behind closed doors, like I was ashamed of needing to feel something, but openly, violently, the kind of cry that chokes and shakes and leaves you gasping like you've run a marathon barefoot over glass. I hit the steering wheel, slammed my fists into the dash, screamed until my throat was raw, because there was no other way to purge what was inside me, years of resentment, of blind hope, of loving people who saw me as convenient but never necessary. And when it was over, when the tears dried and the rage burned itself out, I just sat there, empty, completely, utterly empty, not proud, not relieved, just done. People say there's no pain like a parent giving up on their child, but that's not true. What hurts more is realizing they gave up on you a long time ago, and you were too blinded by your own damn love to notice. Do I regret it? God, I wish I could say no. I wish I can say it was the right thing, and that justice matters, and that tough love will save him where patience didn't. But the truth is, I don't know anymore. I don't know if I did the right thing or if I just finally snapped and took the first exit out of heartbreak I could find. All I know is I'm not going back. Not this time. Not ever. No more second chances. No more pretending. No more being the guy who pays for stuff.